Penguin Random House Audio presents The Ocean's Menagerie: How Earth's Strangest Creatures Reshape the Rules of Life by Drew Harvell. Read for you by Arndt. I dedicate this book to marine field stations all over the world, but especially Friday Harbor Laboratories, University of Washington, on the Salish Sea, a rich mecca for invertebrate research and study, where I had my beginnings as an invertebrate ecologist and maintain my current research base. Preface. All life began in the sea. Multi-celled animals without backbones, the invertebrates, arose in the oceans roughly 700 million years ago, and for upward of 200 million years, they were the only game in town. No animals lived on land, and vertebrates, in the form of fish, had yet to emerge. A menagerie of otherworldly creatures evolved during this very long stretch of time, becoming the ancestors of the marine animals we recognize today as sea anemones, starfish, snails, corals, clams, crabs, and worms. Calling them ancient doesn't even capture the mysterious, deep history of life on our planet. Although emergence of the actual first animal is buried in deep time, all these creatures have prospered for at least 580 million years since their original forms appeared in the Cambrian era, and countless new species have evolved from each group. Plenty of time and circumstance allowed these animals to perfect staggering biological feats unlike any we see on land. There are animals that photosynthesize like plants, animals that transform wavelengths of light with engineering precision, animals that build castles of glass or limestone using seawater. There are animals that conjure really strange and powerful chemicals that we now use as drugs. I sometimes call the different processes that produce these feats magic tricks, because, despite our best science efforts, some parts of the essential biological processes are enigmatic, controversial, or shrouded in mystery. When spineless sea creatures emerged in the ocean over 600 million years ago, their exceptional multicellular biology upended the balance of power that had previously prevailed beneath the waves. Before them, life in the oceans was dominated for billions of years by single-celled bacteria and protozoans. As the first larger multi-celled animals, such as ancestors of jellyfish, sea anemones, and sponges emerged, they transformed the world. Like superheroes, these new animals possessed novel powers that expanded the natural world and allowed them to persist for hundreds of millennia to survive in the oceans today. In the words of E.O. Wilson, "The love of nature is a form of religion, and naturalists serve as its clergy. Grant nature eternity on this planet, and we as a species will gain eternity ourselves." As a Cornell University professor teaching invertebrate biodiversity and marine ecology, and as the curator of the Blashka Invertebrate Glass Collection, I have been privileged to travel the world's oceans on the hunt for some of its most unusual creatures. C.S. Lewis urges would-be writers to tackle what they know and love. Marine invertebrates are my life's passion, and somehow, it's the very ancient and seemingly simpler ones that I find most captivating and surprising. The sponges, corals, jellyfish, and sea slugs. Although less well-known than beloved whales and dolphins, the spineless biota manages the balance of nature in the oceans through creating habitats like coral reefs, controlling the flow of energy through entire food webs, and engineering transformations that baffle scientists to this day. The ideas animating this book began to drift in my mind many years ago, when I was in college and first fell in love with life in the sea. I became fascinated with the many shapes, body plans, and glittering colors I saw when exploring the rich tide pools of the Pacific coast, and when I did my first scuba dives. There were animals without heads, legs, or eyes. Creatures that looked more like flowers than animals. Animals that had shells and fearsome claws for protection, and others that seemed completely vulnerable but were loaded with the most toxic chemicals on the planet. My fascination led me to study marine ecology in graduate school and as a professor at Cornell. The more I learned about the critters in the oceans without backbones, the corals, sponges, worms, jellyfish, clams, crabs, and octopuses that make up 99% of diversity in the ocean, the more awe I felt in seeing the marvelous adaptations they had for getting food, reproducing, and avoiding their killers in an environment spinning with an abundance of life. I spent thousands of hours underwater studying how spineless animals run the economy of undersea worlds, and reporting back to an audience of other scientists. A committed reader myself, I longed to share my knowledge and fascination with a broader audience. In 2014, after the New York Times published some of my essays about underwater research in Indonesia, I finally took the first step into authorhood. My topic sat in plain sight for many years before I saw it. As curator of Cornell's Blaschka glass invertebrates, I was in charge of restoring and exhibiting almost 600 glass figurines depicting particular species of marine invertebrates in fine and accurate detail. The glass masterpieces had been created over many years in the late 1800s by a father and son team, Leopold and Rudolf Blaschka. The story of the Blaschkas and how they created what was essentially a time capsule that we could use to measure changes in the diversity of the tropical and temperate oceans was a quest I described in a book. It was published in 2016 as A Sea of Glass. My next book came out of the terrifying experience of seeing some of my most powerful and iconic invertebrates decimated by a disease epidemic that spread without warning over the west coast of North America in 2014. As a specialist in marine diseases and leader of a large network of scientists, I was deeply involved in investigating the epidemic and its impacts. Afterward, I developed a book about underwater epidemics and implications for marine life in a warming and increasingly stressed ocean. That book, Ocean Outbreak, was published in 2019, just ahead of our own large human pandemic. Once Ocean Outbreak was published, I thought more about an idea simmering in my head from my earliest dives underwater. Each kind of marine invertebrate exploded with an extraordinary ability that was somewhere between impossible and magical, and made it what it was. My brain ignited with the extent of biological innovation on display in the invertebrates, and the sheer wonder of so many fundamentally different body forms built over evolutionary time and completely unrepresented on land. I thought about how unusual and shrouded in mystery the core biological adaptations of many invertebrates are, and realized they are more fantastic than the superpowers of the Marvel Comics heroes. This portfolio of strange biologies has given rise to stunning new approaches to engineering and medicine, and the more we look, the more we realize we are only at the beginning of applying new innovations. This book is a journey through my favorite invertebrate body plans in oceans of the world, tapping into the spectacle of life's diversity, the mystery of how these unusual biologies work, and the promise for new innovation. I start this story as a college student, studying sea slugs in the cold waters of the Salish Sea at a remote laboratory run by the University of Washington in the San Juan Islands. My big break came as a graduate student, when I was invited on a research expedition to live underwater on a Caribbean reef for a week. As a Cornell professor, I ran expeditions in oceans from Mexico to the Coral Triangle and searched for matches to our Blaschka glass masterpieces. Recently, the enchantment of the Salish Sea and catastrophes of nature brought me back to the same cold northern waters where I began this journey. The beauties here, and those from all along the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?